So over the years, we've seen plenty of additions to Battlefield in the form of new mechanics, new modes, or overall just completely new elements to the game, some of which stick around for the long term and some of which get removed in the very next game, even if people enjoyed them. And so in the lead up to the next Battlefield in 2025, today I wanted to go over 3 specific things that I'm really hoping we can see make their return in the next game. Now, I'm not going to go over the most basic stuff just because we already know that it is going to be a back to basics approach. So the obvious thing is, I want to see the class system, for example. We already know that's going to happen. So I'm not going to go for the low hanging fruit in this video. I'm going to kind of go for stuff that I don't really expect to see. It's more to stuff that I really hope we do see in the next iteration of Battlefield. Now, the first thing for me, and this is something that I've been saying way back since Battlefield 1, I would do anything to see the Behemoth system make its return in Battlefield. I'm sure most of you guys have played Battlefield 1, but for those who didn't, Battlefield 1 had this awesome mechanic where when your team was losing by a big enough margin, you would actually be kind of rewarded with a Behemoth that was just a massive advantage for your team that would come in usually sort of in the midway point, maybe later on in the game, and would really help you bring the fight back. And it just evened up the odds a little bit because obviously a lot of the time one team can kind of steamroll the other team. Now in Battlefield 1 they had behemoths like the airship, they also had an armored train, or on maps with big masses of water they had the dreadnought, as well as eventually in the DLC they had the Chart 2C, which was just a massive tank that was like 5 or more times more powerful than a regular tank. Now if they managed to make that system work in a game set in World War I, surely in a modern setting it would be even cooler, because there is obviously so much more advanced technology these days than way back in World War I. Then again, maybe the charm of the Behemoth system actually came from the World War I setting. For example, seeing an airship in the early 1900s was probably just the most insane thing that people had ever seen, whereas some sort of Behemoth system in the year 2030 is obviously very different. Seeing an airship today, granted, you'd probably still be kind of blown away by it, but it's not that out there compared to what it was back in the 1900s, and it's also much less of an advantage, so maybe that is where the charm of the Behemoth system actually came into play in Battlefield 1. I do still think they could do it really well in a modern setting. They could do stuff like AC-130s, for example, which have been in Battlefield 3 and 4, albeit they weren't quite the same. It wasn't actually controlled by the player. You could be in the gunner seat and actually shoot at the battlefield and stuff like that, but it was kind of on rails, whereas the Behemoths in Battlefield 1, they were completely controlled by the player. But something like an AC-130, or honestly even just similar to what they had in Battlefield 1 with a huge tank, little things like that could still be a really awesome system in a modern Battlefield. They could even go a little bit more, I guess, out there as more of like a prototype stuff, so stuff that isn't actually real, but maybe stuff that the military is, they want to build in the next 5 to 10 years or something that's kind of a bit more out there. They could use stuff like that just to make it a little bit more exciting for players. If you see an AC-130, it's not that crazy and it probably wouldn't be as cool of a thing to see in Battlefield compared to that awesome airship from Battlefield 1, and so that's maybe a way they could make it be a little bit more out there and a little bit exciting as well. But I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts, so be sure to leave a comment below as to some awesome modern day behemoths you could see them adding in the next Battlefield. Now before we get into the next 2, if you guys are new to the channel and you are interested in more Battlefield content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is plenty more content on the way in the lead up to Battlefield 2025, so make sure you don't miss out. Now something else I really want to see returning is the squad point system from Battlefield 5. I think Battlefield 5 did this perfectly, and to me this is probably one of the biggest strengths of that game, probably one of the only strengths realistically of that game, and I actually really miss it. Again, I'm sure most of you guys have played Battlefield 5, but for those who didn't, the way this point system worked is that you and your squad would essentially accrue points throughout a game from really any action. It was stuff like, for example, even just getting kills, you would kind of get points for your squad, but mostly the bigger points came from capturing objectives, especially when it was you and your squad all on there at the same time. And for example, if your squad leader gave an order to go and capture the C flag, for example, and then all 4 people in your squad did that, you would gain massive points for your team, and then your squad leader was actually able to use those points in order to like order in V2 rockets or just even ammo drops. There was smoke barrages, for example, kind of just some extra bonuses, not only for your squad, but also for the entire team. And it really did just feel like you and your squad were actually working together to kind of earn something, compared to a lot of other Battlefield games where, yeah, the squad system's cool and it's good to be able to spawn on teammates and all that kind of thing, but sometimes it doesn't really feel like the squad's actually do anything. You're just in a squad. Those are the people you can spawn on, and that is literally it. I really hope that we do see this return. Now, again, I don't really think that we will. People really liked it in that game, and then they just got rid of it in 2042. So it's probably one of those things that we'll just see similar to the Behemoth system, where we'll probably just never ever get it again, or maybe in like 10 years or something. But I think it would be a great addition into the next Battlefield, something that is already proven that people do enjoy. And now that we're going back to that regular class system, I think it would be just a perfect addition for the next Battlefield game. And I wouldn't really want any changes done to it other than just making it a modern version of it, rather than, you know, World War II era stuff like the V2 rockets. Now, last but not least, and this one might be a bit of a hot take, I'm not too sure whether you guys will agree with this one or not, but something else I would love to see returning in the next Battlefield is actually the plus system from Battlefield 2042. This is probably one of the only things in 2042 that I actually look at and go, you know what, that is a fantastic mechanic. Most of the other stuff in the game really does fall pretty flat, unfortunately, even though I did enjoy the game for the most part. But for me, the plus system is actually really, really good. And I do think this should be something that becomes permanent for Battlefield in every single Battlefield moving forward, and almost have them make it like one of their key mechanics that Battlefield becomes known for. I've only ever really seen this system done in, I believe it was the Crysis games back in the day. And so it's not like they're the first people to do it, but with that being said, it's not like Crysis owns this, and it's not like Crysis is known for this either. And on top of that, we haven't had a Crysis game in like 15 years at this point. So they do have an opportunity to make the plus system pretty much their own thing and make that something that is kind of synonymous with Battlefield. And that's something I think they should really, really take advantage of. Now, a lot of people didn't love it in 2042, mostly around the, I guess, realism, as well as a bit of the balancing too. Obviously, if you can just change your attachments at any given moment, there were some weapons in that game that just meant you could have them kind of set up like an SMG, but then if there's someone at range, you could switch out a bunch of attachments and make it a bit of a long range weapon. And it did just mean that some weapons became kind of jack of all trades. And I do understand that. I think a way to make it a bit more realistic as well as more balanced is to show the actual animations of the character putting on the silencer or changing the magazine to a larger one, for example. In 2042, it was just instant. As soon as you change the scope will just appear and there was no animation. I think actually showing the animations of the character changing them would not only add realism, but could also kind of add a downside to making those changes, meaning that sure, you can still make your weapon a bit of a jack of all trades, but in order to do so, it's going to take a few seconds, and in that time you could get shot and killed, meaning that the stakes of doing it are just that little bit higher. With that being said though, I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts on not only the stuff that I mentioned, but even some stuff you guys want to see returning in the next Battlefield as well. So be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments section, and like I said, if you are keen on more Battlefield content, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.